Hi everyone, thanks for joining our latest Frazer Jones View from the Top Global HR Director Virtual Roundtable series. Today we have a spotlight on financial services HR leadership, specifically across Asia. My name's Charlotte Matthew and I lead our financial and professional services HR search business across Asia. Frazer Jones was set up over 20 years ago and we're proud to now be the largest HR search business internationally, consisting of 118 HR search consultants across our 14 offices. Alongside our HR search work, our team also facilitate HR talent programs, such as our Rising Star program, which is aimed at high potential HR talent up to VP level, as well as our HR View from the Top executive program for our HR leaders. Part of our View from the Top offering is that every 2 to 3 months, our global team facilitate these recorded sessions to help enable our HR leaders to share at a high level some of the upcoming people priorities and challenges that you're facing in each of your respective businesses. These are unprecedented and extremely challenging times, and the resounding feedback from our HR community is that in this new normal, given all of the ambiguity, these sessions can be really invaluable. So with this in mind, I'm privileged to be joined by 4 great HR leaders spread across Asia. We have Jill Rees, who's our Global Head of HR for Technology, Operations and SC Ventures at Standard Chartered. We also have Joel Fastenberg, Head of HR ASEAN and Country Head of HR at Citi. We have Mukta Arya, Head of HR APAC at SocGen, and Perry Tan, Group Head of Learning Design and Learning Partner for Tech and Operations at DBS. I'm going to now pass over to the panel to give you all a very brief personal introduction of yourselves, just covering off your current scope and role. Jill, over to you.
Thanks, Charlotte, and hi everybody, great to be with you. So I joined Standard Chartered almost 1 year ago as the Global Head of Tech Operations and SC Ventures, as Charlotte just mentioned. That's covering about 40,000 employees across 60 countries around the world. We've got 6 major locations. So here in Singapore is the hub of those 3 business areas where we have our MT members based. That's Michael Goritz, who's our CIO, and David Whiting, who is our COO, who I partner. It's a large business, pretty complex, with its challenges, but lots of fantastic opportunities. In my career, I've worked in the UK and Australia, and as well as now Singapore. Thanks, Charlotte.
Great, thanks. Over to you, Joel.
Well, thank you, Charlotte. Great to be here. Thank you again for including me in this exciting panel. Hello, everyone. I'm the Head of Human Resources at Citi for Singapore and ASEAN. That remit spans 6 countries. Roughly 30,000 staff. I should note that I'm very new to my role, having just taken on the position in May and having moved to Singapore 2 months ago. Moved to Singapore from Tokyo, where I'd worked for nearly 9 years as the Japan Head of Human Resources for Citi. Started my career at Goldman Sachs in New York, and I've across my career worked in New York, Tokyo, and now Singapore for a few months. Thank you again.
Thanks, Joel. Over to you, Mukta.
Hi, I'm Mukta Arya, and thanks, Charlotte, for inviting me here. I'm currently the Head of HR for APAC for Societe Generale, having taken the role recently, like Joel, for Citibank, which is actually from 1st of September. I have been working with some for the last 15 years now, first in India as a Head of HR for India, then in Hong Kong as Head of Talent Development and Inclusion. I moved to Singapore 4 years ago and now back to Hong Kong from 1st of September. My role actually encompasses around 2,500 employees across 12 locations in APAC, normally looking at corporate and investment banking. So that's our focus. And it's basically working with the senior management of APAC in SocGen to really look at our people development, the cultural change that we want to have, and emphasizing on managerial culture here. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Perry, over to you.
Thank you, Charlotte. Hi, everyone. I'm Perry from DBS. DBS is a 29,000 strong bank, regional bank in Asia. I spent about 2 years in DBS so far. Prior to that, I spent about 15 years in the finance industry, in another international bank, and also in the insurance industry. Through my career, I've done HR roles, I've been in operations, I've done compliance role, and also done tech project management roles. Right now in DBS, I hold two portfolios. The first one is that I'm the group business and learning partner supporting technology and operations, where I look after all the people capability needs, which at the moment is very heavily focused on digital acumen and deepening of technology skills. And my second portfolio, I'm the head of learning and design for the bank, where I lead a team of learning consultants and designers who develop learning programs and learning assets for the bank. And both roles keep me extremely busy every single day.
Thanks, Perry. Great. So I've spent the last week or two having one-to-one discussions with each of you, really discussing your priorities and challenges that you're having, mainly to do with the future of work, but also the journeys that your organisations are going through as well. There were a few consistent themes that came up throughout those, and so really we're going to focus on those. But if there is anything else you want to bring up either throughout or at the end, do feel free to sort of add in. So firstly, we're going to cover off HR's role in supporting and driving business strategy. We're then secondly going to cover off talent and learning, as well as digitalisation and wellbeing within those. And then finally, leadership, culture, purpose and values. These all interrelate, but if we could keep to topic as best as possible, that would be wonderful. We could probably also speak for hours about each of these things. So thinking of your diaries, it would be great if we could keep each answer to a few minutes or so. So starting off with the role of HR in supporting and driving business strategy, we're actually covering this in recognition of the organisations evolving as a result of changing business priorities and the global economy over the course of this year as well. So Jill, I'm going to kick off with you. On our previous Global HR panel session in June, your peer Diane Brockenshire at Standard Chartered kindly shared with us that the future of work was one of the key global pillars or priorities you're focusing on across the bank globally. She mentioned that as part of these conversations, they've really accelerated over the last few months in light of the pandemic, with the firm seeing this as an opportunity to really reinvent processes and practices as well. So 3 months on, how have these conversations evolved, and what sort of key themes are you as HR, as well as your global leadership team, keeping front of mind? It would be great if you can also tell us at a high level the sort of programs you're putting in place to support the future structure of the bank.
Yeah, thanks, Charlotte. Yes. Diane was absolutely right. Yeah, while we're in, very challenging times, both from a business and a personal perspective, what the context has done, it's the context that shifted, has really started to shift our employees' mindsets and frankly their expectations around the employee experience. But let's talk about mindsets first. So we were very much on a journey of transformation led by David Whiting, our CEO. And HR then and now has a key role to play and is playing in driving the business strategy. What we've seen in the shift in mindset is an openness to reimagine how we might need to change and how we could do things. A year ago, a large percentage of our employees were working from home. We turned overnight to 95% of our employees globally working from home. That would have been impossible previously. And what changed, so what were the practices that we did differently that we're now deploying? We just got the right people in the room to talk about the problem and to start solving the problem. So we had the tech team there, we had the ops team there, we had the revenue leaders there, partnered with HR and said, right, how do we solve all of this? So we made a decision fast, and then we applied that way of working, which is very much an agile way of working, to the execution of that. And so it truly has accelerated the new ways of working that we'd started to implement a couple of years ago. But that openness of our employees to trial new things and to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, whether it's with new technology tools or the new ways that we make decisions. It's been absolutely incredible just how adaptable we all are as humans. And the other types of things that we've introduced are rather introduced as accelerated. So from our people agenda, we've accelerated looking at how people work, but where they work. So very much thinking about the future and how many people will work from the office. Will the office have a different purpose? Will it be a hub where people come together from time to collaborate? Will we move to a way of working where somebody might work a couple of days in the office, a couple of days at home, a couple of days somewhere else? And we very much took an employee listening approach to understand from our colleagues all over the world what is it that they would be comfortable with in the way of working in the future. And we will move to be piloting that in January of next year. An unheard of the speed to start shifting, you know, a 96,000 employee organisation to that. So we're excited about that. The other thing that we've perhaps accelerated is how we're thinking about performance management. We were looking at simplifying. We were looking at its purpose to suit, you know, our needs as we serve our clients. For those familiar with agile practices, you will know it's about working as teams and working together to solve problems for our clients. So that's where we're shifting to in the performance management space, much more on the team space. And finally, we have, of course, the programs is thinking about how we support that through capability building. And I think we're going to get onto that later on in our conversations.
Thank you, Jill. That's a really, really good overview to our session. Joel, I'm going to come to you next. So as you mentioned, you've relocated to Singapore a few months ago, having operated as head of HR in Japan with Citi for 9 years. I think with that in mind, we'd really appreciate your observations on how HR strategy and operating models vary in Japan at a high level sort of to Singapore and ASEAN as well. And also, how do you think this might change over the next few years?
Thanks, Charlotte. Sure, a number of similarities, but certainly some differences as well that I can speak to. Similarities would be how we as a firm have been managing through the pandemic, you know, to put it simply. Some differences, you know, of course, based upon local nuances across countries, but the overall focus of putting the safety of our employees first and foremost is consistent and the same, whether we're talking Japan, Singapore, or any of the ASEAN countries for that matter. Also the need, you know, to really listen to staff, hear from them directly, you know, whether that's through focus groups, whether that's through surveys that we've sent out to really get to the heart of where the pain points are, how they've been struggling, how we can help, have been pretty consistent across Japan, Singapore, and ASEAN. Looking at Japan, you know, Singapore specifically, they've had a pretty similar journey, you know, as far as COVID's concerned. You know, both countries have managed the pandemic well, you know, overall for the most part. Both had partial lockdowns, you know, a circuit breaker here, you know, a partial lockdown with no name in Japan, but largely consistent. Both are now starting to normalize. Other countries across ASEAN, the Philippines, for example, still struggling. As many of us may know, we've seen an uptick in cases, you know, over the past 4 to 6 weeks, which creates unique challenges. Yeah. Coming off of what Jill was talking to, the future of work is another challenge and priority where I can draw similarities. It's a body of work that started to take shape for us at Citi globally. across APAC and locally here in Singapore as well, and many facets to this. The type of flexibility we can offer staff in terms of where they physically work moving forward. You know, we're still in Singapore, roughly 80% working from home, you know, myself included, as you can see. So the type of flexibility moving forward in the short, medium term, even the long term, in terms of what we can provide to staff, how we recruit, how we onboard and acculturate talent into the organization, particularly if that needs to be done in a virtual setting, how we train and offer learning programs virtually, how we interact with staff, how we train managers to manage in a virtual environment, all subsets of this future of work that we're going through and just now exploring. And to be honest, we've just started to scratch the surface. There's a lot more to come, but there are work streams decked against each of those areas I mentioned and making some real interesting progress. Also, a lot more, one unique difference that I'll point to, the direct HR interaction with the regulators here in Singapore versus what I've been accustomed to and used to in Japan is very different. You know, the regulators in Singapore, as I'm sure all the panelists and yourself, Charlotte, are aware, are very proactive, very engaged, you know, with human capital matters. So I've been on the ground for 2 months. I'm 6 weeks out of my SHN, my stay-at-home notice, my quarantine. But that's really apparent to me. I've been engaging with MAS pretty regularly over the last couple of months. So that's a unique difference, and I suppose challenge, but an interesting one that I'm working through now. Thanks, Charlotte.
Thanks, John. Great overview. Mukta, I'm going to come to you now. Firstly, huge congratulations on being appointed to Head of HR for APAC. And thank you ever so much for joining us today, because I know that you've just packed up and relocated your life back to Hong Kong just a few days ago, looking lovely in quarantine. So what are the key HR priorities at SocGen across the region, and how have these conversations developed in 2020 as lessons learned from the pandemic, which will help shape the future of the organisation?
Thank you, Charlotte. It's my day 6 of quarantine, but I'm sailing along with a lot of meetings. So for us, the HR priorities are a continuation of what we had from 2019. It has changed, of course, a bit because of the pandemic. So as Joel said, as Jill spoke about, the way people working from home, that is something which we were doing earlier, but it has really catapulted us in a new kind of situation. We have managed pretty well, but we are looking at, it's a mindset change, you know, which has happened, especially with sales and front office staff being able to work from home, being compliant and still able to do things and make money for the bank. I think that has been a great shift in mindset, and we are actually looking at work from home 2.0, you know, for us, where we are making it like a way of life. We are also looking at cultural shift, which is not a major change from what it was earlier, but in this environment where people are working from home, where trust needs to be there, how can actually managers engage workforce in these kind of situation? And of course, we are depending a lot on technology, but also how to make it more effective. That's what we are working on right now. Learning and development, as Joel mentioned, it is something which is quite critical, and we have moved a number of things online, virtual, but also trying to make sure how we can make it more engaging, because we just don't want to make everything digital and it doesn't work. You know, that is not something that we are looking at. We are looking at more effectiveness with the virtual mode of delivery. So this is something which we are looking at. And finally, we are looking at the managerial culture, which is linked to the other culture that I was talking about, which is also driven by the regulators in different countries. Now we are present in 12 different markets, and as other banks, all the other panelists would agree that this is something which we have to do but it also helps us to define the behaviors that we want from the employees and how do we actually put it in practice. So that's something which we are working on, not only because of regulation, but also because it's the right thing to do, for an organization. Really, it's the digitalization and the innovation piece, which we are embedding in all our HR processes, because that is now really a necessity. So we are looking at predictive analytics and using approaches like organizational network analysis to make the decisions related to people much more informed and help the senior managers to take really good decisions for the workforce in the region.
Thank you. Thanks for that. So Perry, putting the learning and talent agenda to one side, because we'll move on to that very shortly, it appears that generally speaking, some Asian headquartered financial services organisations have perhaps been slightly less impacted by the pandemic, or certainly the headlines are more positive in some instances. DBS, I'd say, is a prime example of that, with a recent article stating that the bank's going to hire more than 2,000 people in 2020 with no layoffs under the current CEO, Piyush Gupta. With this in mind, what are some of the strategic HR priorities that firms in this position should focus on to ensure ongoing growth of the business in a cautious market?
Thanks, Charlotte. So first, I want to qualify the assertion that Asian HQ banks are less impacted by COVID. I think indeed that's the situation now. And although we are all relieved, all five of us sitting in Singapore, that we are comparatively more well protected, we're comparatively safer, we all know that there's no guarantee that things can turn south in a hurry, like how it did in parts of Europe, how it did in Korea, how it did in Hong Kong. So I think it's important for us to take a very prudent outlook at things. We maintain a certain level of appreciation, but we stay cautious. So let me share perhaps three strategic HR initiatives that companies can do, and some of which DBS has done to keep and dig up in face of the challenges. First is to deal with the COVID situation. So I think when COVID hit, nobody knew what was it about. Everybody is learning. So everyone went about building a robust BCP plan. So everyone went about doing things like split teams, social distancing, work from home, work from anywhere, keeping the lights on, while trying to keep productivity and also engagement high. And that was not easy because everything was moving very fast on a day-to-day and sometimes on an hourly basis, especially in the initial months whereby data on the pandemic was actually very, very scarce. So HR can deliver all of that with policies, guidelines, toolkits, technologies, and also training. And I think in DBS, one thing that we did, which was I thought was especially caring, was that we actually distributed care packs to every one of our employees, even after they started working from home. So what was inside the care packs? It was a thermometer, it was face mask, which was in really short supply at that point in time. It was even a bottle of vitamins for people to take so that they can boost their immune system so that they don't catch the pandemic. So that was something that we sent out, and it was very well appreciated by the staff. And of course, after we do that, we keep the lights on, we manage the situation as the rest of the panelists have spoken about. We start to think about what is life after this. So we start to think about transition back to office after COVID subsides. What roles can be put on a permanent work from home situation? What is the percentage of staff that can work from home? Would it be work from anywhere or work from home? Does it impact our hiring and location strategy? So all these are conversations that's happening now. And of course, what would it mean to a company if a significant number of employees go on a permanent work on home basis with respect to engagement, with respect to identity with the organization? So that's the first thing, deal with the situation now and also going forward. And perhaps the second thing we can think about is companies can think about being opportunistic in hiring. So you mentioned that DBS, there's some news saying that we are hiring despite the pandemic. We are quite opportunistic. So in Singapore, the government, we are fortunate that the government rolled out many, many strong schemes to support businesses and jobs. So there's this scheme called the Singapore United Traineeship Program. So that supports organizations in Singapore to hire fresh graduates out of universities. So it is a very generous scheme. The government co-fund about 80% of the monthly training allowance, which can be up to Sing dollars $2,500 for fresh graduate. And considering that the median wage for fresh grad is around 3.5 to 4K. That's almost that's more than half of the pay of a fresh grad. So this is actually a win-win proposition for all parties. The fresh grads get jobs, and they don't need to go and deliver pizza or deliver food, right? They get great industrial experience. Companies get energetic young talent, warm bodies working with full capacity at subsidized cost, and of course the government keeps everyone employed. So it's a win-win situation for everybody. And another area of hiring for DBS is that you know that we are the best digital bank in the world. We won the award a couple of times. We are still relentless in our hiring of tech talent across all the spectrum of seniority. So that hasn't subsided despite the situation. So that kept the employment numbers up in hiring. And perhaps the last thing that everyone can consider doing is ride the digitization bandwagon. So before COVID, everybody is trying to digitize. And because of COVID, I'm very sure not only in banks, but in all industry, I heard from all my peers in all the industries, both in HR and the business, that their respective companies' digitization plans have been expedited and brought for 5 to 10 years. So that's amazing, that's a decade. So how HR can support this? There are quite a few ways. Of course, in the L&D space, a lot can be done to deepen enterprise digital acumen and deepen technology skills. We can roll out more change management training initiatives. And of course, for HR processes and products, there's actually also a lot of opportunities to use technology and chatbots. So I can give a couple of examples in DBS. So we have actually developed and rolled out a chatbot that is going to replace vanilla HRM activities, so that everything is managed through a chatbot, and it creates more efficiency. And also in the recruitment space, in the talent acquisition space, we also managed to roll out a chatbot that is able to do first-level filtration of CVs and candidates. So again, that massively reduced the number of CVs going to a warm-body talent acquisition person, and that also massively increased the efficiency of how we operate.
Thanks, Perry. Really interesting overview. Do any of the panel have any questions for each other regarding anything that we have covered off so far, or any commentary? Otherwise, we'll move on to talent and learning. No? Okay, so talent and learning then, without a doubt, when thinking about HR and the leadership agenda, topics like talent, learning, development, inclusion and well-being are very, very much at the forefront. Jill, in our one-to-one, I know you mentioned that Standard Chartered are prioritising a lot of work around upskilling and reskilling employees as functions become increasingly more automated. That's featured across all of these conversations so far. But can you elaborate on the types of frameworks and programmes that Standard Chartered as a bank are currently rolling out?
Yes, thanks, Charlotte. I think the first thing I would mention is we think about this problem holistically. So what are we automating? What are we digitizing? And that very much starts from our client needs. So defining our client needs. Then we do some workforce planning. What does that mean in terms of the skills that we need? And I talk about skills there, Charlotte, rather than jobs, because as we move into this, as Perry said, digitization has accelerated. As people, we all need to be thinking about how do we remain relevant? How do we gain new skills and build new skills? So we've got a framework where we've defined the workforce of the future, we've defined skills, and then we start to think about what do our employees need? And again, through employee listening, what they were asking for is help us understand what's changing, help us understand how I can acquire new skills and what those skills are. So building a framework and communication around that, so that knowledge and our employees being comfortable with, frankly, everything changing in the world at the moment, but being able to navigate how they can acquire new skills. We've invested in a new learning platform, which just makes it so much easier for our employees to have access to the new frameworks. We've identified the top 10 skills. And we've set up what we're calling learning academies. It'll be a very familiar title to, I'm sure, many who are listening. And we've prioritized things like, in the technology space, absolutely around engineering, cyber, those two areas. And for Singapore, the opportunity is just tremendous because the shaping roles in those areas are based here in Singapore. And we've developed programs that helps you understand. You can do some self-assessment. Where am I? What skills might I need? Other areas include what we're badging new ways of working. So that's those agile working practices that I mentioned earlier, as well as other techniques. Data and analytics is a growth area for us. We're all in banking, so we'll all be very familiar with, the challenges that affords us, but also the opportunities. And again, our strategic centre is based here in Singapore. And we've got, numerous vacancies in all of those areas because they're growing. So in thinking about talent, it's about how do we build from within, but also how do we acquire. I'm very much looking to increase the number of new graduates that we've got joining us who can grow and build their skills and their careers. But not forgetting, the many employees and people that want to change career midlife. How on earth do you shift, into cyber or into data if you're currently sat in a business role? So helping both, external but also internal talent, how they might do that through, the skills building within Standard Chartered. And so those are just some of the ways that we're thinking about it. Next step for us is helping deploy skills to the work that matters most. So we've piloted a talent marketplace, which again, I'm sure people are familiar with. So it makes it easier for people to move to work. And I say work rather than roles. It's about the work that matters and the work that matters to our clients. And so that's something that we've been piloting over this year and looking to expand, Charlotte. So I think that sums up many of the things that we're doing here at Standard Chartered.
Great, thank you. Perry, DBS has been praised for all of the bank's efforts related to digitalisation as well as upskilling and reskilling employees. Can you give us a bit more of a view on what that looks like for the organisation?
Yep. I'm going to put on my learning design hat now, favorite topic. So again, I'll maybe share three themes that we are doing now. Number one is that as with the business, L&D is also digitizing very aggressively. So I think putting learning content to e-learning is kind of a thing of the past. We still do it. We do it even more aggressively. But what has kind of surprised me, and I think the whole world was forced into it, was that a lot of companies have been forced to convert their face-to-face classes into virtual classes. So traditionally, we used to think that certain domains of training like soft skills, leadership training, managerial training, sales training, you cannot do it online on virtual class because it's simply not effective. You need to see the other person in order to do that training. So we had that assumption. And we also had the assumption, although WebEx has been around for a long time, Zoom is a new kid on the block, right? We had the assumption that any kind of WebEx training is boring. It's technical training. You can't go beyond 1 hour. If not, people are just gonna fall asleep, right? And many people did, I did myself. But because of the situation, things were thrust upon us and we had no choice. How long can you hold back your manager training or your soft skills training? You can't hold on for too long. I mean, we were dealing with a pandemic. We were looking at the government data and we were thinking, when would there be a reopening or softening of the safety measures from the government? And it was looking like it was never going to open up. So we're closed in DBS. We closed our classrooms, I think it was in February this year, and we remain closed for now. So I think if I recall correctly, in April, we decided that we can't wait anymore. The classes for managerial training, sales training, we need to convert them into virtual classes using WebEx and Zoom. The thing is that nobody knew how to do it, and we actually had to learn on the fly. So I got my team of instructional designers, we scoured the internet, then we did a lot of testing and hypothesis and experimenting. And on the fly, we created techniques for developing and delivering virtual classes on WebEx and on Zoom. And we found that, to our surprise, that sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes, a lot of times, some of these trainings on the soft skills, they actually work just as well. In certain cases, even superior to doing face-to-face, okay? So we actually found that managerial and leadership training works virtually. Sales training, we're a bit ambivalent about that. We do it, we have no choice, but certain domains, we find that it works in virtual classes. So we're being forced to learn. And I think when this blows over, many organizations, many L&D teams are going to offer soft skills training in two formats, the face-to-face one, as well as the virtual one. So the impact aside, I think the cost savings, as well as scaling up of these kind of training programs is going to be tremendous. So that's the first one that I think we can think about, virtualizing classes. The second one is with regard to creating learning programs. I've been in the business of creating learning content for more than 15 years. I actually created learning content for a university in Irvine back, 15 years ago, a long time ago. And I was creating learning content for banks or insurance companies for a number of years as well. And in the past is not too long ago, maybe 5 years ago, content tends to stay relevant for a few years. So you create a content and then the content is going to stay relevant for 2 to 5 years. Then after two to 5 years, you would refresh the content, all right? But today, because of the rapid pace of change, content changes on the fly. Content creators, both in-house content creators and as well as vendors, we have trouble keeping up with the content, especially content regards to data, technology, and digital. They change every day. There is no way for us to develop modules and curriculum and we say roll it out and you'll be running for 3 or 4 years because they change all the time, which is why we are kind of leveraging on this pandemic, right, to shift the focus and the learning strategy a little bit. Instead of using a traditional top-down structured approach of we're going to create this curriculum, we're going to create this learning roadmap, we're going to roll out to you, it's mandatory or strongly recommended, we say that we're going to create a learning ecosystem. So what does that mean? We're not going to take away structured curriculum. So that's still going to come in certain areas like risks and all that. We'll still centrally create content, we roll it down, top-down, but from a bottom-up approach, we are also actively equipping all our staff with access to MOOCs. That's a massive open online courseware. So that's your LinkedIn learning, that's your Coursera, that's your Udemy. And in the technology space, I believe the top players are Frazer and O'Reilly. So we are actively giving access to massive libraries of learning content to our guys so that there's on-demand learning, there's just-in-time learning, and self-directed learning. And at the same time, we are also driving a lot of learning events, even virtually in the COVID situation, whereby we get speakers from all levels, senior MDs up to the junior ones like AVP, to actually do learn, share, teach. So if someone is an expert on something, they'll come online in a virtual class to teach everybody, and we incentivize people to do that using a variety of things. And through doing all this, we hope to create a learning ecosystem whereby we have programmatic learning interventions, we have bottom-up learning whereby people can just learn from the vast amount of resources that we give them. And at the same time, we have events and policies that enables learning. So building a learning ecosystem is something that we are working relentlessly on right now. And the third thing regarding L&D that I'll talk about is mindset shifts, which I think Jill alluded to just now. And I totally agree what she said, because focusing on the hard skills is actually an easy part. You can kind of map out what skills people need, or that data or digital, although they change very fast, right? But mindset shifts are actually very difficult to do because people tend to be fearful of change, especially people who have been in the workforce for some years. They are experts in a few areas, and it's not an easy message to take if you tell them that, look, you need to plan ahead, broaden your skill sets, deepen your skill sets. If not, you might be obsolete, or your function might be obsolete. So what we do here is that we have been talking about certain philosophies like the growth mindset. We emphasize psychological safety. We imbue our managers with the awareness of creating environmental psychological safety within their teams, so as to enable them to have a more less threatening conversation with reskilling and upscaling. But this is a journey that's easier said than done. We took a few good steps, but we're still along the way, and we hope that in doing all these things that I mentioned, we are on the way to building a true learning organization whereby the learning culture is always on. Thanks, Charlotte.
Thank you. That was a really interesting perspective. Thank you, Perry. Joel, it didn't go unnoticed that City really embraced digital innovation, particularly in areas like campus with Ingrid's team across APAC. Do you want to just give us a bit of an overview about how the bank's structured to meet the business needs of today and the future from a talent and learning perspective?
Sure, happy to. Thank you, Charlotte. And completely agree with Perry. Looking at the immediate future, you know, the digital transformation that we're going through, coupled with the pandemic, frankly, has really unlocked a lot of doors and opened up a lot of minds. You know, prior to this pandemic, at least few at Citi, you know, would have thought that remote working, remote hiring, remote learning on a large scale at least would be possible. Some good examples in the recruiting space, in the talent acquisition space. We ran a virtual summer internship program that just finished up, 5 weeks, where globally we ran this, but talking specifically in Singapore, went through a 5-week virtual program where interns were guaranteed offers, just given the environment and the uncertainty. We took a view globally to guarantee full-time offers to students in hub locations. So in New York, London, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Tokyo, excuse me, they were guaranteed offers, and they knew that coming in. The program itself, the content itself, obviously, you know, the guaranteed offer, you know, extremely well received across the board, not just from students, but actually from staff as well. We've also been piloting, using an external vendor's platform, a virtual work experience. So a shortened program, you know, takes 5 to 7 hours to complete. And this is really more of a marketing branding tool targeting students, could be first-year students, second-year students at university, to give them the opportunity to really understand what a day in the life of a first-year analyst would be. And we give them real work. It's all been designed by the respective businesses, but on this vendor's platform. So we've started to roll that out since July, and it's powerful because you can have students from anywhere in the world, and we're piloting this in Asia, I should mention, but you can have students from anywhere in the world. So we've had thousands and thousands of students participate in this, and they can go through more than one module because we have different modules for different businesses. So I don't think we've even seen just what the ROI is and how powerful it can be, but initial feedback has been fantastic. So a lot of cool things going on in the campus recruiting space for sure. You know, more specific to, I suppose, learning, we've spent a lot of time through the pandemic, and it's, you know, continues today, you know, connecting with our staff, right? We sent out a wellness survey globally. You know, we've managed locally numerous focus groups targeting different groups of our employees. We've spoken to employees directly. We've rolled out numerous, you know, similar to what Perry was talking about, numerous virtual learning programs to staff at all levels across the franchises. If there's one thing that I'd like to highlight within the learning space, we've been spending a lot of time working with managers and training managers on resiliency. And how they can manage effectively through this pandemic, through this challenging situation, but also in a virtual environment. Not easy. You know, we've all experienced, you know, an enormous amount of change. All of us on this panel, you know, all of our employees, an enormous amount of change impacting our professional and personal lives with little clarity, frankly, as to what tomorrow is going to bring. And so employees come to us, come to the HR teams, go to their managers. And so we've been working to try to equip managers in terms of how to deal with these day-to-day conversations, targeted helping managers, employees really manage change, you know, having managers put themselves into the shoes of the employees. Could be one of a million different situations. They could have small children at home. They could be living alone. You know, that's a population that we've particularly been focused on that sometimes gets forgotten about. Obviously, employees living with elderly parents. So we've tried to really gauge stress levels, engagement levels, putting the well-being of our staff as our number one priority. So a lot of virtual programs, mostly with managers, but with staff as well on resiliency. I'd say that that's been a top area of focus for us over the past 2 to 3 months. Back to you, Charlotte. Thank you.
Thanks, Joel. That really nicely leads on to my next question, actually. Mukta, I know talent and development, as well as performance management and coaching, are areas that you're incredibly passionate about. I suppose on a slightly separate topic, what would your advice be to those managers and leadership who are trying to engage talent and increase productivity, where inevitably some organisations will be downsizing in the near future? I.e., how do you balance productivity and cost with things like engagement, well-being and inclusivity? It's an ongoing dilemma.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a difficult question, I must say that. In APAC, Societe Generale we have always worked on the principle that we want to have the optimal size of workforce. So we are quite lean. We never overdo, the number of staff that we hire, etc. And I think that is quite important, because when times are like this that we are going through now, then we have to be quite selective about where we are using our resources, how much time the managers are spending time to engage employees, etc. So if you have already a workforce which is limited, workforce which has been chosen with care, while recruiting, we take a lot of care when we are actually letting people into Societe Generale, and then you are spending time on them, you're very focused. And I think that really helps, because then you're not spreading your energies over a large variety of things. You are focused, you are actually trying to make the maximum out of what we have. So for me, I think this is important, selectivity. For managers, when they have to balance between productivity, engagement, and also cost optimization, if they are not careful from the beginning, from the time they are recruiting, then it becomes a big issue, and of course, we all know that retrenchments are not something which we like to do, or which anybody likes to do in any organization. So again, selectivity for me is very important, and this is the message to managers, that this is how you can focus your energies and be very effective with the people that we have chosen as our team members. The other things that I would say is also to be mindful when the times are good. So again, for me, it's a cycle. You have to be mindful when the times are good, and still being mindful that we are not overdoing things. We are not overspending. We are not hiring people just because we have the headcount and the times are good, etc. Because when the times are bad, then you have to really cut it down, and it really pinches quite a lot, to employees. So this is, I think this, people think during good times versus bad time has to be tempered. And that's what we always tell our managers, that whenever you are making decisions, think of the long-term view and not the short-term view, which is there, because sustainability is the most important thing, in organizations. You cannot say that just because I have the budget right now, I spend it all. We have to also, for example, when we are launching a program, we have to see that whether it's sustainable over a period of time when times may not be very good. So how do you make sure that you have that kind of a mindset? And what I feel is that managers who have these kind of mindset, they are the ones who are able to balance it pretty well, and they don't have to face the issues where, when times are not good, it becomes a very difficult situation for them to balance the two things. So yeah, I would say that this mindset is what we try to inculcate in our managers through the training programs, but also through the day-to-day work, how they are managed by their managers. Sustainability, long-term view, which has to be there, as well as prudence, when they are making decisions in everything, whether it is recruitment, whether it is travel, whether it is learning and development, in all walks of life. And for me, it is something which is a discipline which comes over a period of time. You cannot inculcate 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, or only when times are not good. It has to be done when things are better, when people are not under any pressure. It should come from there. And then when times like COVIDs are there, I mean, they're used to it. So that's what I would say we like to manage. And we have been doing it actually for quite some time. So, and as I said, we had discipline in terms of cost efficiency, as well as recruiting, as well as, doing things in a more economical way, I would say. So,
Yeah.
just to manage the balance between the two.
Yeah, that all sounds very sensible. Does anyone else have anything they want to add on that topic? No? Okay.
Charlotte.
Oh, yes.
Actually, I have a question that I'd like to maybe get the wisdom of the other panelists of their observations. So
Yeah.
when we first started this massive work from home, I won't even call it experiment, we're forced to do it, right? There were some concerns from management about productivity. But from what I see in DBS, that concern turns out to be a non-issue. And in fact, recent data has suggested that we have the reverse situation, whereby people are more productive than ever. And even anecdotes have said that people are too productive and they are losing out on work-life balance. So we did some surveys where we found that in certain pockets, work-life balance scores have actually gone down. So the hypothesis is that people are waking up every day and logging onto their laptops, doing Teams meeting from 8:30 until 6 or 7 p.m. at night with hardly any time for lunch. And that really impacts work-life balance. So I just want to get a sense from the panel of whether that is an observation that you see in the respective organizations.
So true. Joel, I'm going to come to you because I saw you nodding furiously.
I just earlier today did a joint Zoom panel session with Citi and HSBC on wellness, and this topic came up from the audience. So it's clearly, we've observed at Citi, somebody from HSBC asked the question. It was clearly affecting her personally. So I don't have a lot of pearls of wisdom to share. It's definitely there. We recognize it as an issue. And we've been sort of furiously in recent months, getting the message out in various forums, be them town halls, email communications, focus groups, whatnot, encouraging staff to take time off, of course. Easier said than done when borders are still closed and people can't travel, but really pushing that. We have seen vacation, take up has gone down substantially compared to last year. But also really kind of giving some best practices, sharing best practices, tips and tricks in terms of blocking out portions of your day, right? Work-life balance might mean one thing to you, Perry, might mean something entirely different to me. So it's not a one size fits all, and just encouraging people to block out sections of their day that work for them, whether it's 7 to 8 to go to the gym, whether it's 12 to 1 to have lunch with a spouse, or other times during the day, and to have the courage to sort of push back and say, no, it doesn't work for me. So a lot of that's happened, but I'm still hearing noise around the topic. Yes.
Thank you. Thanks
for sharing.
So can I add something here on
Yes,
this topic?
absolutely.
Yeah, because we are also, working on work from home 2.0, as I said earlier, for us. And this was also a topic where people are not actually taking care of them because they are too productive, as Perry said. So what we did was we were mindful of this, and we did have a series of well-being seminars where we had experts who really spoke about how to balance your life while you are working from home. And I think it worked quite a lot because there were practical tips which we actually circulated to the employees. There was Zoom sessions, etc., on this particular topic. Also, I think what we did is there was a managerial toolkit which we sent to all managers on how they should handle this, and not, for example, some how can they handle their teams, and also ask them to relax a bit when they see their team is always on, even replying to messages late in the evening and late in the night, etc. What they should do to make sure that people are rejuvenating themselves. So also we try to do some contest, how people keep healthy during this, like for example, in Singapore, it was the circuit breaker period. And we gave them decathlon vouchers as prizes so that they can actually spend time on exercising, on cooking. So there were recipe contests where people won things, etc. So what we were trying to do is also encourage people to do other things and not only work. But I think it basically has to go through the managers quite a lot, because, you know, the proximity managers are the ones who can influence a lot. If they are the kind who are always on and not doing all these kind of things, their team will also, you know, take a cue from there. So we really believe in our organization that it's the managers at all levels, and especially the middle managers, who can actually make a difference in the way people look at work from home, not only as just working, but also managing their lifestyle, you know, in a balanced way.
Yeah, and having open communication, I suppose. Fine. So now, as our final section of the session, I wanted to touch on the topics of leadership, culture, purpose, and values. While the economy is challenging at present, it is starting to improve. An employee's connection and bond to their employer is very important, particularly when they're physically in the office less. Topics such as having strong and emotionally intelligent leaders who lead with empathy, as well as objectives such as having a clear purpose and meaningful values, can make a huge difference to the working environment, as well as business performance. So with this in mind, Mukta, how can HR work with leaders to shift mindsets and behaviours, and what is SocGen doing to address and embed this consistency across the organisation?
Yeah, thanks, Charlotte, for this question, because this is very much on the top of the mind of our senior managers, not only in APAC, but across the world for us. As I mentioned earlier, that we do have the leadership model, and the behaviors which we want to inculcate in our senior leaders as well as the middle managers is quite important. We do have a leadership model which basically is a conversion of behavior of our values into behaviors. Team spirit, it's innovation, responsibility, and commitment, which is centered around clients for us. So what we have done, and this started for us in 2015, where we relooked at our values and relooked at our leadership model to change with the changing times. And then we said that it has to be cascaded by the managers. And this is something which is not a HR issue, you know, it's something which has to be done by the managers, and they have to have the buy-in in that. And they are the ones who will, say, hold workshops for their teams and talk about what our values are and how these values are translated into behaviors in day-to-day working life. So that was done actually globally for us. We started in 2015, and we still embed it in all our HR processes. So for example, when we are hiring people, our recruitment criteria are based on our leadership model. When we are promoting people, the promotion forms have those criteria. Succession planning, we use the same criteria. So what we did was, over a period of time, we tried to make it part of the vocabulary of all the employees, you know, at different times. So we did that. And that was, I think, quite important, because then we have the buy-in from the people at different level. And if they had any issues and they did not understand it, they basically would ask their managers that why they do not understand this particular thing. So I think that was quite important for us, and all our managers actually now understand it. They may not believe it. Sorry, Charlotte, I need to just...
No problem. No problem. Thank you. I think we got the gist of that one. So Joel, without a doubt, the coverage and scope of HR seems to be increasing, with in some instances HR operating on a very lean basis and very long hours as well. I know you guys work very hard. What advice would you give to HR leadership in terms of how to maximise value add to the business, but also productivity of the HR team specifically?
Thanks, Charlotte. Some initial thoughts. It sounds very simple and perhaps too simple, but first and foremost, we need to listen. We need to understand the business environment that we're operating within, potential changing priorities, because priorities are changing and changing pretty rapidly, and the needs and feedback from our employee base. At Citi, I'd like to say that we always do this, but particularly during the pandemic, we really spent a lot of time, took the effort, spent the time with staff at all levels to understand how they were feeling, what was working, what wasn't working. We did the same with managers, and we then adjusted course. So we weren't fixed in one direction. We adjusted, in some cases, just adjusted pretty dramatically. and began to do a lot more with managers and employees around various learning and particularly wellness initiatives, which continue. So direct feedback is invaluable, more so now than ever before. I'd also suggest regular communications from HR. Again, also more important now than ever. Town halls, focus groups, which I talked to earlier, even email communications, frankly, are helpful. You run the risk, of course, of over communicating, but I would say in this environment, I'd rather over communicate than under communicate. Specifically with the HR team, look, I think it's important to remember that our HR folks, our HR teams, are employees as well, and also need to be heard from. HR support for the HR function. I can't talk to the other organizations, but at Citi is sometimes forgotten, frankly speaking, to some extent, and shouldn't be. So by really taking the time with our direct staff, 1 downs, 2 downs, what have you, listening to them, we can make necessary adjustments as a function, which I do think allows us to be more effective and productive. Thanks, Charlotte.
Yeah, and having mentors and coaches, etc. That's really, really good. Mukta, do you have anything else you want to add on the mind?
Yeah. Yes. So what I wanted to say is that the buy-in from the senior management is really important, and for us in our MANCO, which is the management committee for APAC, HR is, for example, for my role is to basically emphasize on things related to the leadership model and making sure that if, for example, we have things which are not, people are not following it, for example, there are conduct matters where people are not following the leadership model or they're not being, the role model for the organization, then we should be taking strict decisions against that, because we really do not want to glamorize somebody who is totally against what we want to do, as part of our leadership behavior. So I think that has become quite evident for us, and we have really incorporated it in our processes, not only HR processes but business processes which are there. And I would say that it is consistently, we need to really talk about it. And the thing is, once you do that and people see that there is no respite from it, I would say that, it's like you have to hammer on these kind of things. And finally, it does become a way of life. So in the beginning, it does require rigorous implementation, rigorous follow-up, making sure that we really do not make exceptions, if you really want to see changes in leadership behavior which are there. And it has to percolate to all levels. It's not like one of the layer is exempt from it. We have to make sure that we do it consistently across different levels of leadership.
Thank you. Well, we all love to hear stories about companies walking the talk and altering conversations from could we to should we, as well as those financial services HR functions that are truly continuing to put the human into HR. Jill, Standard Chartered, I think, is a prime example of an organisation living through its purpose, which is here for good. I'm interested to hear how Standard Chartered's collective sense of purpose helps drive success and value across the organisations for employees, but also communities.
Yeah, one of the reasons I joined Standard Chartered was because of its purpose. It really spoke to me, and how we search to help clients and communities was the overarching theme that connected. And every bank I've worked for 3 banks in the last 20 years, they've always had a strapline with a purpose. And since I joined Standard Chartered, the difference is they actually walk the talk, as you say. Pre-COVID, that was working in many countries, really understanding what mattered in the countries, what was needed in the countries by our clients, and adapting our services and products to meet their needs. Post-COVID, that's translated into $1 billion provided to clients in the service of health and essential services. So, we're not a big pharmaceutical. We couldn't support in a way that perhaps they are helping. But through financing, we could help that effort to help find a vaccine, to help get supplies to those areas of the world who are in need. And that was something that resonated not only with me, but across the organisation with our employees in terms of driving success, building that sense of pride that we are making a difference. At the other end of our business with our retail customers, understanding those that are in financial distress and looking at how we can support them in the loans that we offer to them during this time. And if I bring it right back to HR in the current times, and we talked earlier about, the world is changing, work is changing, but also there's very real challenges around productivity and the economic context that we're now all living through. And so for me, that has been about working with my colleagues both in HR and the business to help our employees understand all of that context and how they can retain, build skills to remain in employment. It's very easy when you're doing productivity programs to say, oh, those roles were cutting, so those people should leave. That doesn't need to be the case. And I think it's, being here for good in that context for our colleagues has been really important and something we're working very, very hard to solve for. So that sums up some of the things we're doing in living our purpose here at Standard Chartered.
Thank you, Jill. Perry, what's the best piece of advice one of your former leaders has given you that you feel would resonate with our HR community in Asia now? Ideally, a positive, great one as we're coming to the end of the session. No pressure.
Okay, so I was actually having coffee with one of my senior stakeholders who has retired for some years. And naturally, the conversation turned to this topic of this tiny virus, big monster known as COVID, who has thrown the world into a tailspin, right? So we were talking and he was giving advice on how do we deal with the situation. And then finally, he gave a kind of a philosophical and pragmatic look at things. He said, Perry, just do this. Manage and control the things that are controllable. Don't worry too much about the things that's outside your span of control. And everything is going to eventually turn out fine, as it did for humankind in the past few thousand years. So I thought that was a very good one to take away, because I think that allows us to maintain a certain level of sanity in our professional life and also in our private life. And one day, or I don't know when, I hope it's sooner or later, this will all blow over, and when it blows over, we can then plan a holiday where the destination is much more interesting than your dining room or your bedroom or your neighborhood park.
I'll see you there. Any other final words of wisdom from the panel, or any other questions you want to ask each other before we conclude? No? Okay. So we've covered off a fair amount of compelling content relating to the financial services HR leadership agenda across Asia. What is clear is that HR's had a real opportunity to be at the forefront of the new normal. I really hope that as an HR community, we continue to collaborate, lean in, and take a leading role in helping the organisation and workforce adapt to the changing organisational requirements, also building a sustainable workforce. Personally, I just want to say a huge thank you to all of the panel for joining us from all over the world, as well as those who are currently listening to our recorded session. If you're interested in participating in or attending our upcoming similar Frazer Jones HR events in the future, please do reach out to one of our lovely team. And if there's any key topics you want to see featured, we'd also love to hear from you. So stay safe and we wish you all the best. Thank you.